The monk, I think everyone's probably familiar with. It's a melee physical DPS class and playmaker. It has a high innate dodge chance. It's a top DPS class when attacking from the front. It can feign death, wears leather armor, and kind of a little bit tanky, but comes mostly from that innate dodge chance and possibly blocking. The Beastmaster is we were calling it Warden, but we felt that wasn't an accurate representation. It's a melee physical DPS and support, specialized in dual wield melee attacks. It's a hybrid of the rogue and the shaman. Wears leather armor. It can shapeshift into animals, and has a lot of ties to animals. We are also talking about a animal taming system, so it's also a pet class. But it's you don't just have the pet, right? You actually go out into the world and tame an animal. So the Shaman is a healer and support class, specialized in heals, specifically their efficient heal over time lines, melee buffs, and debuffs. So right now I'm playing with the idea of them being the best melee haste and melee slower. So really good at hasting allies, statistic buffs, and haste, and then obviously the slow debuff line. The Spellblade is a damage and support and off-tank class, specialized in melee and magic. Hybrid of the fighter and the wizard. Wears leather armor, and the idea I'm playing around with is it will have access to a unique line of self-shielding and absorbing magic, in addition to the more baseline kind of buffs. I'm also thinking about a unique mechanic for them where you can, there will be weapon procs that you can use, and the kind of the sword kind of shows that off in the concept. But so one of the procs I'm thinking of is up to a cap you can build a secondary life resource called shields, but that's still just like an idea. It hasn't been implemented or anything, but I really want to play into like shielding and barriers, but then also offensive magic and procs and nukes that you'll have access to.
Nick, were you thinking with the shielding and stuff that it'd be one of those, it'd essentially be like a self buff that's managed pretty actively? So if they're off tanking or whatever, it's one of those things where there's a certain amount that they're absorbing, and as that's getting burned through, they're recasting to sort of be able to continue, or?
Yeah, something along those lines. So cool. It's right now that's more of on the conceptual side for me. I have to think it through a little bit, but something along those lines would be pretty cool.
Belfaster was asking, do you see the Spellblade bringing more int-class buffs, melee buffs, or both?
I see them maybe a little bit of both, but kind of leaning more towards the spellcasters, kind of applying debuffs for them. But we'll have to see. A lot of the hybrids, I'm considering giving them basically group utility buffs, so that they're not on par with the top DPS classes. They're very serviceable DPS. They're comparable, but not at that tip top DPS tier. But the group buff that they bring, is pretty darn good. And depending on what kind of class composition you have in your group, you may want to bring a Spellblade, or you may want to bring a Ranger, or you may want to bring a Beastmaster. So that's what I mean when I say, like kind of like hybrid support. Not like a full-on support class like the Shaman or anything like that, but kind of support utility, group utility. As far as the Elementalist goes, a damage, a ranged DPS caster class that specialize in elemental pets, summoned items, debuffs, and there's something I want to do is, or play with, is kind of synergistic things you can do with your elemental pets. So if you combine like an air pet with like a fire nuke, you can have kind of like a backdraft effect, stuff like that. So mixing and matching synergistic buffs and debuffs and what pet you have and what spells you're casting to create different effects. Okay, so the Enchanter is a support class specialized in charm, crowd control, attacking and enhancing the mind, and enchanting allies and their equipment. Currently, I'm, thinking about, if they have access to the whole kind of trifecta of haste, slow, and resist debuffs. Like the magical resist debuffs. I'm thinking about. So this is another thing that I'm trying with the whole like all the classes is maybe a reshuffle of certain utility spells and debuffs, etc. So there's more class interdependence needed. So the idea maybe so charm is just a very powerful ability. But it's also really powerful because Enchanter, in other games in the past have, like EQ is basically had access to, haste and slow and charm and tash. So definitely considering reshuffling some of those so that to kind of work a charm pet in a group that you'll have to, bring other classes instead of just the Enchanter kind of just being awesome and having all that stuff. But some of my hesitance too is that being a pure support class, having all those things are kind of their powers. So I'm really want to do some testing and see how that feels. If the class still feels good, if they lose something, but I also want them to gain stuff too. For example, I have this concept called Enchant Ally, which is
cool.
You can buff a single group mate. This is a concept. We don't have this in the game yet, but the concept is you can buff a single group mate, allowing you to switch views between you and the enchanted ally, which gives you a secondary ability bar. And it allows you to cast a small set of unique abilities which originate from the enchanted ally. So imagine you enchant ally your monk polar or your tank, and it basically allows you to kind of work with them as they are, maybe doing some kind of playmaking or polling or stuff like that. The Enchanter will also have access to a mana regen buff, mana drains, mana dumps, and other debuffs. So kind of what you would expect there. But yeah, so that that's Enchanter is definitely going to be one of those controversial classes, I feel. But I personally, I think Charm is a cool mechanic, and I want to keep it. But maybe there's some ways that we can promote more teamwork and group play in the process.
Yeah.
Belfaster asks, what does enchanting others' equipment look like? I've been kind of thinking about like potentially just enchanting weapons, stuff like that for different procs or effects, and maybe even visually showing like a VFX change. Then let's see what else there was. Zoidberg also said, would it make sense that enchanters can only charm humanoids? That was another thing I was thinking about. But we'll definitely we'll see. And so Enchant Ally was, I consider it a powerful utility that say you're not into the charming thing. That's like an either or kind of situation. You either have the charm pet or you have Enchant Ally. You can't do the both at the same time. An Enchant Ally would only be a single target group member. You can't cast it on multiple people at a time. So, so the Druid is a healer and support class, specialized in heals, debuffs, and crowd control. So I'm kind of thinking that they're going to be able to actually debuff resists. They're going to be able to multi-root. So I'm considering certain classes only being able to root a single target, so that, you know, certain classes like Druid really shines in rooting, being able to root multiple targets. Makes the Enchanter's crowd control more worthwhile as well, if, you know, you can only single target root. But that's something, you know, we're going to play with. That's not final. It has a quick cast PB AoE snare, can AoE root, has rain AoE heals. Kind of fantasy behind their magic is kind of moonfire and lightning magic and blizzards and stuff like that. So really weather based. And yeah, the idea is to kind of, you know, make the class feel a lot better than, you know, the EQ counterpart, and yeah, just more appealing, more debuffs, more crowd control, and stuff like that.
There's a question. Sorry if I missed it. Did you say the Druid could change the weather?
Yes, yeah, we got to bring that in. That's one of the best flavor elements of a Druid. So yeah, without a doubt.
And then actually have that linked to some of the actual systems, since we're, you know, hoping to do plenty with what spawned when and what sort of opportunities may exist for you in the environment based off of the state of the zone or the state of the world at the time. So, as you were mentioning the Druid's different abilities, I was like, we should follow up and talk about biome specific spells. Be interesting to have some biome specific spells that you can load in.
I saw a question about will weather impact buffs and debuffs. Undecided at this time. I think what Sean was referring to was more content availability. Like, say it's raining, you might have access to, you know, some certain mobs may spawn or something along those lines. So yeah. Undecided on the buffs and debuffs part, but yeah, more content availability thing, I think.
Yeah, it'd be more like mobs or things that you can harvest or collect, or the things of that nature. So
the Necromancer is a damage and support class, specialized in undead pets, debuffs, drains, and off heals. So, you know, we'll have the undead pets, we'll have the classic skeleton pet, but there will also be, you know, different variants and different kinds of pets. You know, similar to like how the WoW Warlock has a kind of a arsenal of pets for different situations. That'll be similar for the Necromancer. So you'll get those sooner than the end game. Kind of like, you know, in EQ you have the skeleton pet, you know, forever, and then you get like the Spectre and stuff like that. So it'll happen much before that in your journeys. They'll have Charm Undead. Some of the fantasy I want to play off of is blood magic for some of the heals and drains and stuff like that. So I know like a lot of people are really fond of the blood mage from Vanguard. So definitely want to get some of that kind of tied in a little bit, along with you know, your traditional more like poison and disease and shadow based magic. Considering giving them some really strong debuffs as well. You know, we talked about, you know, maybe moving something off the Enchanter. You know, Necromancer could be one of those beneficiary classes where maybe they were to get, you know, they're slow or something, but that's not decided. That's just kind of theory craft at this point. But yeah, so that's the idea for the Necromancer. So another thing I wanted to add was another mechanic I think Ali mentioned in the chat, and kind of reminded me. I believe our game supports up to having 3 pets, so maybe there's, you know, maybe we play with the idea of them being kind of more of a like swarm kind of multi-pet class, maybe that's not like a permanent thing. Maybe that's like a temporary cooldown, like kind of Army of the Dead kind of style ability where you can, for a short time, maybe have multi-pet. Another idea that we have been talking about is maybe doing kind of a raise the dead ability, but those are again just kind of concepts and ideas, and it may be something that we do, but cool. So wizard is magical range DPS. One thing that I've been really thinking about is them being kind of an execute class. So think lower health percentages. They get benefits and perks off of that by landing a nuke during those times, or a special, maybe a special nuke line during those times. So we decided early on, and this is Sean really loved this idea, and I love too, is they can actually dual wield and use swords. So we really wanted to kind of play off of the Gandalf fantasy, and wizards can definitely get in the fray. They might not be doing the best physical DPS, but there may be some perks and bonuses to kind of meleeing in combat, and that you could see that maybe in some other classes too, but we definitely wanted to get that showdown with like the Balrog kind of moment for the wizards. So expect something like that. So again, also expect kind of weapon procs, buffs, considering giving them some more utility and debuffs too. One of the things I was considering is kind of, enchanters previously in other games like EQ had the magical debuff resist. Was considering maybe moving that to the wizard, but that's not like a set thing or anything. That's just like an idea I'm toying with to kind of, again, like I was saying before, maybe rearrange what classes get what utility, so there's more kind of interdependence. So another thing is, in EQ, the wizards really were kind of mana starved a lot, and part of like being an execute class is, maybe there's some kind of mana return for getting those conditional nukes in, so you could become closer to like being mana neutral, or sometimes maybe even being mana positive when correctly fulfilling those various conditionals, or using cooldowns and engaging in melee combat at opportune moments. And they are obviously a cloth-wearing class as well. So the Bard is a support class, kind of a jack of all trades, kind of a Swiss Army knife, specialized in, of course, singing and playing songs. Right now, I believe we have them slated as a leather armor wearer. So, kind of the unique take on the Bard is, it's conceptual right now, but it's something that we're going to definitely implement and try. Is you kind of have a secondary ability bar that allows you to basically place musical ornaments into your songs. So maybe you can do a trill, so you can get a kind of a double effect off of a song, or you can maybe do a crescendo that's kind of like an amplify effect. So we want to really play into like the music theme of the Bard, and give them kind of actual music ornaments that they can apply to their songs that they're playing. So in terms of what they have access to, your kind of your mezzes, your lulls, there will be damage over time songs, there'll be regeneration songs. Again, really kind of a jack of all trades. They'll also be the fastest class. They'll have a traveler's group kind of song buffs. They can have your fast movement speed. And to say something again about the bards, so there's currently we have it set up so that you can twist song, but that ornament bar that I was talking about, musical ornaments, I was thinking about some kind of like a melody mechanic being the repeat. So you could run a repeat to kind of have that melody effect in game, but it wouldn't be like through like a macro. It would actually be like through a pressed ability, and then while you are repeating, the idea is that you still have an active nature to the class through those ornaments. So you're not necessarily just twisting constantly, but you're inserting those musical ornaments where you want them, depending on the nature of the fight and what's going on in the fight. So that's conceptual. That's to come, and we'll see how it works out. But right now, the current implementation is kind of more of like the classic like style where you're just twisting, and but as we get further in development, we'll see how that feels. So it's a melee physical DPS class and playmaker. Brings small utility, it brings utility, but doesn't bring like a ton of utility, right? So some of the utility we're talking about is like short duration stuns and incapacitated. So if you saw any of the streams where we were playing with the rogue, you get an incapacitate, which is a kind of like a short duration mez, and that can if you're soloing, it's not going to be super easy to solo by any means, but rogue is going to be better off than they were in, say, like classic EQ or whatever, right? So you can kind of incapacitate a target, get behind, do a backstab. So they're going to have access to short duration stuns and incapacitates. They'll have probably like they'll have slow through. I want to do slow through poisons, but it's not going to be as massive as like the Shaman slow, for instance, right? It's going to be a definite kind of buffer slow that, if it's like a really threatening target, you'll still want to get that Shaman slow or another really good slow up, but they're also the top physical DPS class, top tier DPS. They'll have, so stealth is, hide sneak rolled into 1, so you don't have to worry about hide sneak. You'll have access to some aggro drops, and we're also talking kind of about like a kind of smoke bomb cooldown based ability where you can jump into the shadows and drop all your aggro, but that won't be like so it'll be a cooldown based, significant cooldown, several minutes, so it won't like be a feigned death for them by any means, but they'll kind of have a get out of jail free card every certain amount of minutes. So yeah, just top DPS class, some light utility, some light stuns and CC, but mostly focused on the damage and playmaking. Oh, they'll also have access to kind of a single target like pacify, kind of like think of like a sap from WoW rogue kind of thing. So like I said, I want them to have more playmaking duties than they did in like EQ. So the Archer is a pure physical ranged DPS class. Obviously specialized in archery and ranged attacks, wears a leather armor, has access to auto fire for archery based attacks, and then they'll also have kind of special attacks that are archery focused. So like there'll be like a targeted shot that it's kind of like a wind up kind of attack for big damage. There'll be kind of utility shots as well, like a kind of a dispelling shot for kind of an offensive dispel. So basically how they differ from the ranger, right? So the archer was born out of the want to kind of have a class that focuses purely on the archery, whereas kind of the ranger still has very serviceable archery, but does other things as well. And so Archer would be the Legolas to the Ranger's Aragorn, if you want to make that kind of comparison. Other ideas we're playing with for the Archer are elemental arrow kind of arrows or arrow tips. So maybe like a frost arrow or a fire arrow, you know, depending on the situation. Also maybe kind of like a strafing attack where you're shooting arrows like all crazy out of you, and those are some of the ideas. But the idea is very, very focused on doing range damage, and they are in the same tier as, so the physical DPS tiers are Rogue at the top, and then the second tier right below that would be Monk and Archer. So Archer is a very sought out DPS class. The Ranger is a melee physical DPS and ranged physical DPS and support, specialized in melee, archery, and magic. Hybrid of the Archer, Fighter, and Druid. Has access to auto fire for archery based attacks. So, you know, you can auto attack with your bow, just like the Archer. You won't have access to some of the nice kind of like really nice like shot attacks that the Archer has, but you'll still, you know, have ranged attacks that you can do, just not as powerful, but still quite good. So it definitely plays into, again, like the Aragorn kind of theme. So kind of a versatile DPS and some utility as well. Also, so again, they're going to bring group utility, so group buffs. So with tracking, we're thinking about how tracking could work. I'm not sure if it would be kind of like the EQ style or not. It's something we're gonna have to play around with. I was thinking about something more like maybe they could show like a kind of like a directional indicator where like other party members are, something along those lines, or there won't be any mini map in the game, so it wouldn't be like the WoW style tracking or anything like that. Oh, another thing is want them to be competitive DPS, right? So again, they're not going to be on that tier of like a rogue or an archer or a monk, but they are not going to be too far below that. So if you were kind of like a classic EQ ranger, expect to be putting out more DPS. So you're not going to be a joke. I definitely want the ranger to feel strong and to be desired in groups. So expect that. And yeah, so they're also be compared to the Beastmaster and the Spellblade. They wear chain armor instead of leather, so kind of wanting them to be pretty serviceable off tanks. But we'll have to see how it all ends up in the end, because obviously Spellblade could, even though they're wearing leather, right, they may have those absorb shields and spell shields and stuff. So we'll have to see how it all ends up, but definitely want them to be serviceable off tanks and really serviceable DPS.
Drew was asking about pets, and we have discussed tameable, collectible pets.
Yeah. So I think that you were saying, Sean, that you wanted them to also do similar to the Beastmaster, where you could tame pets and stuff like that. And then I think we also talked about kind of flavor pets that are kind of weaker, but have some utility to them. But yeah, definitely tame beast and stuff. The Shadow Knight is a tank class / hybrid, definitely focused on drains and dots, and we'll also have a pet, undead pet, still to be determined how it'll differ from the Necromancer's pets, so we'll have to see on that. So Shadow Knight is going to be a very, very serviceable tank. So we have two kind of tiers of hybrids. We have the Shadow Knight, Paladin, and Inquisitor, and then we have the Beastmaster, we have the Spellblade, and we have the Ranger. This is kind of more of the higher tier of hybrids in regards to tanking. So they'll be quite good at tanking and threat generation. And they'll also be really good at absorbing magical-based attacks. as opposed to the fighter's physical. Yeah, so a lot of kind of necromantic magics and tanking, and also some group utility. Probably not as good group utility as you'd expect from the hybrid DPS classes, but definitely good stuff there. The Inquisitor is a tank class / hybrid who is an anti-spellcaster knight. Think of them as the hybrid between a fighter and an enchanter. They'll definitely have some class-specific flavor though, such as they'll have some like resist debuffs and silences, and generally just anti-magic kind of stuff. And kind of the fantasy behind the class was that Lord Inquisitor Seru or Darth Vader kind of menacing kind of knight that just kind of is out to hunt magic users. And another thing that I think that we were talking about is kind of like magic, like choking effects and stuff like that. And so some similar crossover to the Enchanter, but definitely more like anti-magic focused. And yeah, definitely have some crowd control too. The fighter is a pure physical melee tank class, specializing in protection against physical attacks. Another trait of the fighter is that they put out respectable damage. So we wanted them to feel, so they don't have necessarily too much utility, but the utility that they do bring besides tanking is their damage. They're going to be kind of on par with like that hybrid DPS tier. So while they're a tank class, they also put out respectable damage, and you can, you just as easily invite them to a group and have them slot in as a DPS, and you don't feel too bad about it. Some of the utility though that we're kind of talking about is shouts, probably some kind of like movement displacement kind of things, like maybe like a charge, stuff along those lines. So definitely want them to feel fun in that regard, kind of moving around and making sure that you're applying threat generation in the right spots, and bring what debuffs that you can bring and whatnot. Definitely inspired by the WoW Warrior somewhat. There was a question in the chat, will fighter have that old struggle on threat versus hybrids? So they will not be as good at threat generation as hybrids, but I want them to be better off than they were in, say, like classic EQ era. You shouldn't be like pressing a button and then it's like, oh, nothing happened, right? So you'll definitely have means of threat generation. You just have to put a little bit more effort into it, and that'll definitely go into the ability design and how that is. How that evolves. I have some ideas for it, but it won't be as snappy as, say, as like the hybrid knights, like the Shadow Knight Paladin Inquisitor, but there'll definitely be some means of some meaningful threat generation there. The Cleric will be the main healer class. They're specialized in the largest, most efficient direct heals and resurrections. We have them as plate wearers, but as Goblin was saying, it's kind of a mix in that department. Expect kind of holy magic, kind of like holy shocks and stuns and stuff like that. But again, they're a very powerful healing class. So again, that's kind of a secondary focus to them is the nukes and stuff. But yeah, very holy focused. But yeah, it's very, very strong healers. Lots of like good curing magic. They'll have a lot of different ways that they can heal, and also shielding as well, absorb shields and stuff like that.
And I think, Nick, did you mention, similar to the wizard, the conversation that we were having was how do we get them to be a little bit more active? One of the things that I felt missing from my cleric fantasy when I was playing mine on Eridune was I just, especially as a little like armored gnome, I really wanted to be able to have some opportunity to like not just sit there and get into the fray a little bit, so we've talked a little bit about that sort of balance of activity and whether or not we can use activity to provide sort of a meaningful return on downtime. So balance downtime versus activity in a way where it makes them a little bit more fun. And also a little bit more durable. That idea of being able to off tank a little bit situationally as a cleric and not just heal.
We're thinking about, kind of like maybe imbuing your weapon with like holy power to give you, various procs and effects, healing yourself or others through attacks, regaining some mana through attacks, and different ways that you can kind of get into the fray and auto attack a little bit and bring some benefits to you or your group. So definitely gotta, it's important because a lot of our gameplay comes down to resource management. So you don't want to, you want to make sure that you're not completely ignoring the resource management game, just so you can go in and attack, right? But there's definitely still cool ways of going about having effects like that. So that's definitely one thing that we're going to play on with the cleric and some of the other classes too, like wizard and such. So yeah, be on the lookout for those kind of abilities. Paladin is a tank class and a hybrid. Obviously, it's the fighter cleric hybrid. Very, very defense focused. Kind of a low damage class, but they bring pretty significant healing for a tank class. So one thing is, I wanted them to be better healers than you would see in like classic EQ kind of style. Definitely going to be better in that department. They're also this is going to be a trait for all of the hybrids, but they're going to have a physical attack that you can use to kind of sustain your group through healing. So you could choose to use a pretty hard hitting attack, or instead you could, on a shared cooldown, is another kind of attack that when you use it, it'll heal up your group just a little bit. So it's kind of like sustain healing and kind of support healing that helps keep your group up and keep your group. And then there will also be kind of more of the traditional heals that are weaker than what you would have at the same level as like as a cleric, druid, or shaman. But you'll definitely be able to have some decent healing thrown in there, traditional heals as well. So, and also would like for them to be able to resurrect as well.